He ruled the Chicago underworld with an iron fist and a heart of ice. She was a struggling waitress, suffocating in debt, entirely invisible to men like him. It was supposed to be a strict business transaction, a fake marriage for survival. But the Mafia boss never calculated the fatal risk of falling in love. The neon sign of Lou Mitchell's diner flickered, casting a sickly fluorescent glow over Penelope Hayes' exhausted face. It was 2 a.m. in Chicago, and the relentless biting wind off Lake Michigan rattled the greasy diner windows. Penelope wiped down the laminate counter for the 4th time, her worn-out sneakers squeaking against the linoleum floor. She was 24, carrying extra curves that she hid beneath oversized flannel shirts and drowning under a mountain of consequences that didn't belong to her. Her older brother Jason had vanished 3 months ago, leaving behind a gambling debt of $150,000 to the worst kind of people. Penelope was a ghost in the city. She kept her head down, worked 3 jobs, and tried not to draw attention to herself. Society had long ago taught her that girls of her size, without a silver spoon in their mouths, were either punchlines or invisible. She preferred invisible. Across town, in the towering glass monolith of the Ion Center, Matteo Romano stood looking out over the glittering skyline. At 32, Matteo was the newly crowned head of the Romano Syndicate, a ruthless empire built on shipping real estate and shadows. He was a man chiseled from marble-sharp jaw, piercing dark eyes, and a reputation that made hardened criminals swallow dryly. They called him the Ghost of Cook County. But Matteo had a problem. The old-world Italian commission that oversaw the national syndicates was traditional to a fault. They demanded stability. They demanded a family man. If Matteo wanted to secure his father's seat on the High Council and prevent a bloody turf war with the rival Costa family, he needed a wife. Immediately. "I won't marry one of their pampered, backstabbing daughters," Matteo growled, his deep voice vibrating in the cavernous office. He turned to his consigliere, Enzo Bianchi. "If I marry a Mafia princess, I invite a spy into my bed. I need someone entirely disconnected. A pawn. Someone who won't ask questions, won't expect romance, and most importantly, someone who won't tempt me into a distraction." Enzo, a silver-haired man with calculating eyes, slid a manila folder across the mahogany desk. "I found her. She owes one of our street bosses $150,000. Her brother skipped town. She's a nobody, Matteo. Works at a diner, lives in a shoebox in Pilsen, and she's not your usual type." Matteo opened the folder. A grainy surveillance photo stared back at him. Penelope Hayes. She had soft round cheeks, a mass of unruly auburn hair, and a full curvy figure wrapped in a hideous apron. She wasn't a glossy supermodel. She wasn't a threat. "Bring her to me," Matteo commanded. The next evening, Penelope was shoved into the back of a tinted Lincoln Navigator by 2 men in expensive suits. She was trembling certain that this was the end. Jason's debt had finally caught up to her. When she was marched into the penthouse office of the Aeon Center, she kept her eyes glued to the plush carpet, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. "Sit," a voice commanded. It was deep authoritative and sent a shiver straight down her spine. Penelope looked up and her breath hitched. The man sitting behind the desk was intimidatingly handsome, radiating a dark, suffocating power. He wore a tailored charcoal suit that emphasized his broad shoulders. "I don't have the money," Penelope blurted out, her voice shaking but her chin stubbornly high. "I need more time. I'm working as much as I can." "I don't want your money, Miss Hayes," Matteo interrupted smoothly. He leaned forward, lacing his fingers together. "I want your time. 1 year to be exact." Penelope blinked, confused. "What? Your brother owes my associates $150,000. It is a debt that would take you a lifetime to pay off on a diner waitress's salary. Matteo stated, his gaze raking over her without an ounce of warmth. I am willing to wipe the slate clean. In addition, I will deposit $2 million into an offshore account in your name at the end of 12 months. In exchange, you will sign a contract. A contract for what? She asked, her knuckles turning white as she gripped the armrests of her chair. Marriage, Matteo said flatly. You will be my wife. You will move into my home, attend public events by my side, and play the role of a devoted spouse. There will be no physical intimacy. There will be no romance. You will have your own wing of the house. You are doing this for the money. I am doing this for optics. Do we have an understanding? Penelope's mind spun. A fake marriage to a Mafia boss, it was suicide, but the thought of never looking over her shoulder again, of never scrubbing diner counters until her hands bled of $2 million. It was an impossible temptation. She looked at him, searching his cold eyes. Why me? You could have any woman in Chicago. Why a chubby broke waitress? Matteo's expression remained entirely impassive. Because you are a business transaction, Miss Hayes. You are practical. You are exactly the kind of woman who will easily fade into the background when this is over. I need a wife who will not fall in love with me. The words stung, hitting the deepest bruise of her insecurities, but Penelope swallowed the pain. She squared her shoulders. Fine. But I want it in writing, that Jason's debt is clear the second I sign. And I want access to my own money for clothes. I won't be your charity case. Matteo's eyebrow twitched upward, a microscopic flash of amusement breaking through his icy facade. She had courage. He slid a thick, leather-bound contract across the desk. Sign on the dotted line, Mrs. Romano. Within 48 hours, Penelope's life was completely unrecognizable. She was whisked away from her cramped apartment in Pilsen and relocated to Matteo's staggering multi-million-dollar penthouse overlooking Lakeshore Drive. Her new wing was larger than any building she had ever lived in, complete with floor-to-ceiling windows, a marble bathroom, and a walk-in closet the size of a boutique. But the luxury felt suffocating. She was a bird trapped in a beautiful, terrifying cage. The first major hurdle was the annual Cook County Charity Gala, an event Matteo was heavily sponsoring to cement his image as a respectable pillar of the community. To prepare, Matteo had hired Chicago's most elite styling team. Penelope stood awkwardly in the center of her bedroom, while a haughty, rail-thin stylist named Fiona circled her like a shark. Fiona clucked her tongue, pinching the fabric of the expensive emerald silk dress they were trying to force onto Penelope's body. It's just, the proportions are all wrong. Fiona sighed loudly, speaking to her assistants, as if Penelope weren't in the room. We need something with heavy draping. We have to hide these problem areas. Her hips are simply unmanageable. Maybe a corset to suck all this in. Penelope felt tears prick her eyes. She stared at the floor, wrapping her arms around herself, feeling like the ugly duckling who had accidentally wandered into a swan lake. There are no problem areas. The deep, freezing voice cut through the room like a blade. Everyone froze. Matteo stood in the doorway, fully dressed in a black tuxedo that made him look like a dark, lethal god. His eyes were fixed entirely on Penelope, taking in the emerald silk that clung to her generous curves, the soft flush of humiliation on her cheeks. "Mr. Romano," Fiona stammered, offering a nervous smile. "I was just explaining to Penelope, that high fashion isn't generally tailored for her specific body type. We are trying to minimize the width. You're fired, Matteo said. The words were quiet, but they carried the weight of a judge's gavel. Fiona gasped. Sir, get out of my house before I have my men throw you off the balcony. Matteo warned, his eyes never leaving Penelope. The styling team scrambled, grabbing their kits and fleeing the room in a panicked rush. When they were alone, the silence stretched heavy and thick. Penelope wiped a stray tear from her cheek, mortified that he had witnessed her humiliation. She was right, you know, Penelope whispered. I don't fit in your world. I'm just me. Matteo walked slowly toward her. For a man so large, he moved with the silent grace of a predator. He stopped just inches away. He reached out his large, calloused fingers, gently lifting her chin so she was forced to look into his dark eyes. My world is full of plastic women, with plastic smiles and hollow chests. Matteo said, his voice dropping an octave, a strange roughness creeping into his tone. His gaze dropped to her mouth, then back to her eyes. You are real, Penelope. Every inch of you. Don't ever let anyone in my city tell you otherwise. The dress is perfect. For the first time since they met, Penelope felt a jolt of real electricity zap through her veins. The way he looked at her wasn't cold. It was burning. The Palmer House Hilton was a sea of glittering diamonds, champagne flutes and deadly secrets. When Matteo walked into the grand ballroom with Penelope on his arm, the room fell dead silent. Whispers immediately broke out. The elite of Chicago's underworld and high society stared openly at the Mafia boss and his completely unexpected bride. Penelope held her breath, shrinking back, but Matteo wrapped a heavy, possessive arm around her waist, anchoring her to his side. His warmth seeped through the emerald silk. Throughout the night, Matteo played the role of the devoted husband flawlessly. Too flawlessly. When his bitter rival Dominic Costa approached them with a slick, snake-like smile, the tension spiked. Romanov core. Costa purred his eyes, raking over Penelope with cruel amusement. I must admit, your sudden marriage caught us all off guard, and such an abundant bride. I suppose you always did have an appetite. Penelope flinched at the thinly veiled insult about her size. But before she could even process it, Matteo stepped smoothly between her and Costa. Careful, Dominic, Matteo said softly. The threat in his voice was so lethal, the air around them seemed to drop 10 degrees. Speak about my wife like that again, and I won't wait for a council meeting to separate your head from your shoulders. Walk away. Costa paled, raising his hands in mock surrender, and quickly disappeared into the crowd. Matteo turned to Penelope, his jaw tight. Dance with me. He pulled her onto the marble dance floor. As the orchestra played a slow, sweeping waltz, Matteo pulled her flush against his solid chest. Penelope gasped softly at the contact. This wasn't in the contract. You didn't have to threaten him for me. She whispered, her hands resting nervously on his broad shoulders. He disrespected you. No one disrespects my wife. Matteo replied, his hand splaying wide across her lower back, pulling her closer, so her soft curves molded perfectly against his hard frame. He realized with a sudden, terrifying jolt of panic how right she felt in his arms. He had hired her because she was supposed to be easy to ignore. Instead, her genuine warmth, her sweet scent of vanilla, and the soft, beautiful curves of her body were driving him insane. He was obsessed with her. As the gala ended, they rode back to the penthouse in a heavy, suffocating silence. The air between them in the back of the SUV was thick with unsaid words and an undeniable growing attraction. When they stepped out of the private elevator into the dark penthouse, Penelope kicked off her heels with a sigh of relief. "Well, I think we survived day one of the illusion," she joked, walking toward the massive floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the dark waters of Lake Michigan. "Penelope, wait." Matteo started realizing she was perfectly silhouetted against the glass. A sharp, deafening crack split the air. The reinforced glass shattered inward, raining down like deadly diamonds. Time slowed. Matteo didn't think. He reacted. He lunged across the room, tackling Penelope to the hardwood floor, just as a second sniper bullet tore through the space where she had been standing seconds before. He covered her entirely with his massive body, shielding her from the glass and the gunfire. Penelope screamed, clutching his jacket in sheer terror. "Stay down!" Matteo roared, pulling his firearm from his shoulder holster as his security team burst through the heavy oak doors. As the chaos erupted around them, Matteo looked down at the trembling, terrified woman beneath him. He felt her frantic heartbeat against his chest. In that split second of terror, the truth slammed into Matteo Romano with the force of a freight train. He hadn't thrown himself over her just to protect his contract. He had done it because the thought of a world without Penelope Hayes in it made him want to burn Chicago to the ground. The fake marriage was over. The real war had just begun. The ringing in Penelope's ears was a high, continuous shriek, completely drowning out the chaotic shouts of the security team, flooding the luxurious penthouse. Gunpowder smoke choked the chilled night air, mixing with the metallic tang of blood and the sharp scent of shattered crystal. Matteo Romano remained heavily pressed over her trembling body, his broad shoulders acting as an impenetrable human shield against the horrific violence that had just invaded their sanctuary. His chest heaved against hers, his heart hammering a frantic, terrifying rhythm that matched her own. Slowly, the deafening echoes of the sniper's gunfire faded into the wailing sirens of Chicago police cruisers, echoing from the distant streets far below Lake Shore Drive. "Clear!" shouted Enzo, sprinting into the devastated living room with his weapon drawn. "The perimeter is secure, boss. The shooter took the shot from the roof of the adjacent commercial building. Our guys are already sweeping the stairwells, but he is likely gone." Matteo finally shifted his massive weight off Penelope. His dark eyes were wild, completely stripped of their usual icy calculation. He reached down his large, calloused hands, surprisingly gentle, as he grabbed her shoulders and pulled her up from the hardwood floor. He scanned her face, her arms, and her beautiful emerald dress with terrifying intensity, searching for any sign of a fatal wound. "Are you hit?" Matteo demanded, his voice a gravelly, desperate rasp. "Penelope, look at me. Are you bleeding?" I don't think so." She stammered, her voice cracking as a violent shiver wrecked her curvy frame. She looked down at her hands. There was a thin, stinging slice across her left collarbone where a jagged piece of flying glass had grazed her pale skin. A single drop of crimson blood stained the green silk. Matteo saw the blood, and a terrifying, animalistic fury crossed his handsome face. He turned to Enzo, his expression transforming into a mask of pure, lethal rage. It was Dominic Costa. "I want his streets burned. I want his businesses dismantled. I want every single man who takes a paycheck from the Costa Syndicate hunted down before the sun rises. Matteo the High Council will retaliate if we start a full war without proof," Enzo warned cautiously. "I am the proof," Matteo snarled, picking Penelope up into his arms as if she weighed absolutely nothing. "Prepare the convoy. We are moving to the Lake Geneva estate immediately. Nobody knows that property exists except my inner circle. We leave in 5 minutes." The frantic drive across the state line into Wisconsin was a blur of flashing highway lights and suffocating tension. Penelope sat shivering in the back of the armored SUV, her mind struggling to process the horrific reality of the Mafia world she had willingly married into. This was not a movie. Real bullets had shattered her living room. Real men wanted her dead simply because she wore the Romano name. When they arrived at the sprawling fortress-like estate, hidden deep within the dense pine forests of Lake Geneva, the sun was just beginning to peek over the horizon, casting a pale, cold light over the frozen lake. Matteo escorted Penelope directly into the master suite, a massive room dominated by a stone fireplace and dark mahogany furniture. He locked the heavy oak door behind them. He walked into the adjoining bathroom and returned a moment later with a first aid kit. He sat on the edge of the plush bed beside her. His demeanor entirely shifted from the ruthless mob boss who had just ordered the destruction of a rival family. Here in the quiet solitude of the bedroom, he was inexplicably tender. "Let me," he whispered, opening the antiseptic wipes. Penelope remained utterly still as Matteo gently dabbed the small cut on her collarbone. The sting of the alcohol was nothing compared to the electric jolt of his rough fingers brushing against her bare skin. She looked up at him, studying the harsh, beautiful lines of his face, the dark stubble on his jaw, and the sheer exhaustion swimming in his dark eyes. "You saved my life," she whispered, the reality of the night finally crashing down on her. Tears welled in her eyes, spilling over her soft, round cheeks. "You didn't have to do that. I am just a contract, Matteo. I am just a business deal. You could have let the bullet hit me and found another fake wife tomorrow." Matteo stopped wiping the wound. He tossed the blood-stained cloth onto the bedside table and framed her face with both of his large hands. His thumbs gently wiped away her hot tears. "Do not ever say that again," Matteo commanded, his voice vibrating with a raw, desperate emotion that completely shattered his cold facade. "You are not a contract, Penelope. You are not a transaction." I watched that glass shatter, and in that split second I realized that my empire, my money, and my power mean absolutely nothing if you are not in this world. I hired you because I thought you would be easy to ignore. I was a fool. Penelope's breath hitched. She stared into his dark, burning eyes, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. "Matteo, I am in love with you." He confessed the words tearing from his throat like a desperate prayer. "I love your warmth, your courage, and every single beautiful curve of your body. The contract is void. From this moment forward, you are my real wife in every sense of the word, and I will burn the entire world to ash before I let anyone touch you." He leaned in, capturing her lips in a fierce, devastating kiss. It was a kiss born of adrenaline fear and profound, undeniable love. Penelope melted into his arms, finally allowing herself to surrender to the dangerous, intoxicating Mafia boss who had stolen her heart. But their fragile bubble of peace was destined to shatter. The next morning, while Matteo was coordinating security perimeters with his men outside, Penelope walked down to the estate's massive kitchen to get a glass of water. A quiet, unassuming maid named Rosa was scrubbing the granite countertops. As Penelope walked past, Rosa nervously bumped into her, secretly slipping a cheap plastic burner phone into Penelope's oversized sweater pocket. "Answer it in the bathroom," Rosa whispered, fearfully refusing to make eye contact. "If you do not, he will kill him." Penelope's blood ran cold. She hurried into the nearest powder room, locking the door with trembling hands. She pulled the burner phone from her pocket. There was one unread text message. It was a photograph. Penelope gasped, slapping a hand over her mouth to muffle her scream. It was her older brother, Jason. He was tied to a rusted metal chair, his face beaten raw and bloody. He looked terrified. The background of the photo showed the decaying, recognizable brick walls of the old abandoned Finkel & Son steel plant back in Chicago. A second later, the phone buzzed in her hand. The caller ID was blocked. She answered it, pressing the plastic to her ear. "Hello, Mrs. Romano." Hi. Dominic Costa's greasy, sinister voice hissed through the speaker. "I apologize for ruining your lovely gala last night. It seems my shooter missed, but I have something that belongs to you." "Please," Penelope begged, tears streaming down her face. "Let Jason go. He owes you the money, I know, but I can get it. Matteo gave me access to offshore accounts. I can pay you triple what he owes." Costa laughed, a cruel, grating sound. "This isn't about your pathetic brother's gambling debts anymore, sweetheart. This is about power. Matteo embarrassed me. He thinks he can consolidate power with his sweet, chubby little bride by his side. Here is the deal. Tonight at midnight you will go into Matteo's private study. You will unlock the safe and steal the encrypted ledger containing the Romano family's offshore routing numbers. Then you will drive to the old steel plant alone. If you tell Matteo or if you refuse, I will mail your brother to you in several small boxes. Do we have an understanding?" The line went dead. Penelope sank to the cold tile floor, clutching the phone to her chest, trapped in an impossible nightmare. The heavy grandfather clock in the estate's hallway chimed 11. The safe house was silent, heavily guarded by armed men outside. Penelope stood in the dark bedroom, clutching the burner phone. Dominic Costa's ultimatum echoed in her mind, a cruel loop. She had to steal the ledger or her brother died. She walked toward the heavy wooden door of Matteo's study. She punched in the code he had trusted her with. The lock clicked, and she stepped into the masculine room. Swinging the painting aside, she revealed the hidden wall safe. Her trembling hand reached out to enter the secret combination. But she stopped thinking about Matteo's dark, desperate, loving eyes. He had defended her honor against Costa's very cruel insults. He made her feel beautiful, cherished, protected, and truly seen. Betraying him would destroy his entire empire and kill him. Costa was a snake. He would never let Jason live. Penelope lowered her hand, closing the painting over the safe. She turned around and marched straight down the long hallway. She reached the tactical war room where Matteo was working. Matteo looked up, his harsh features softening at the sight. Seeing tears streaming down her pale cheeks, his posture stiffened. Penelope walked up, slamming the plastic phone onto the map. "Costa has my brother." Penelope choked out her voice, breaking. "He bribed a maid and told me to steal ledgers. I must bring them to the steel plant at midnight." Matteo stared at the phone, then slowly met her gaze. The silence was absolute. Enzo instinctively braced for explosive anger. "Why did you leave the ledger?" Matteo asked very quietly. Penelope squared her shoulders, staring the terrifying Mafia boss down. "Because you are my husband, and I truly love you. I choose you, Matteo. But please, help me save him." A profound, staggering wave of emotion instantly crashed over Matteo. In his violent life, loyalty was bought with blood money. This beautiful woman just handed him her brother's life completely. He walked around the table, pulling Penelope into his chest. "You just saved your brother's life, my fierce queen." "Enzo." "Yes, boss." Enzo instantly snapped to attention with sheer focus. "Mobilize the strike teams and arm everyone with heavy artillery. Dominic Costa thinks he can blackmail my completely devoted wife. Tonight we do not negotiate. We completely eradicate his syndicate." An hour later, black SUVs rolled into the industrial park. The sprawling complex was a graveyard of broken, twisted metal. Inside the main warehouse, Costa stood smoking a cheap cigarette. Jason Hayes was tied to a chair, shivering and bleeding. "She is late," Costa sneered, looking at his gold Rolex. "It seems your fat sister does not care about you." Suddenly, the massive steel doors blew inward with deafening explosions. Smoke billowed heavily into the cavernous, absolutely terrified warehouse space. Out of the smoke stepped Matteo carrying an assault rifle. His elite enforcers poured into the room behind him swiftly. "Costa!" Matteo roared, his voice echoing against the metal walls. A chaotic, brutal firefight suddenly erupted within the dark warehouse. Gunfire illuminated the dark space in violent, bright strobe flashes. Matteo moved with terrifying, calculated precision, dropping Costa's soldiers swiftly. He was a demon unleashed, fighting for his loving wife. Enzo and 2 enforcers swiftly cut down the remaining guards. They dragged the terrified brother behind a concrete pillar safely. Realizing his men were slaughtered, Costa sprinted toward the back. Matteo tossed his rifle aside, drawing his silver pistol immediately. He caught Costa at the edge of the rusted catwalk. He violently slammed the screaming man against the iron railing. Costa gasped heavily as dark blood freely dripped from him. "Wait, Romano, we can make a deal to split territory." Matteo pressed the hot pistol directly beneath Costa's terrified chin. His dark, unforgiving eyes were utterly merciless in the gloom. "You called my wife fat and threatened her innocent family. There are absolutely no deals, Dominic, only very fatal consequences." Matteo pulled the trigger without a single ounce of hesitation. The echoing gunshot signaled the absolute end of Costa's syndicate. It cemented Matteo Romano as undisputed king of Chicago's underworld. 3 weeks later, the bright morning sun completely flooded in. It perfectly illuminated the repaired windows of the magnificent penthouse. Jason was safely recovering in a private, highly secure clinic. Matteo walked into the study, holding the fake marriage contract. Without a single word, he tore the expensive paper perfectly. He tossed the shredded contract straight into the roaring fireplace. He dropped to one knee, pulling out a velvet box. Inside rested a breathtaking, flawless, absolutely massive diamond engagement ring. "Marry me, Penelope, for real this time," Matteo said softly. Penelope looked at the man who had surrendered his heart. Tears of absolute, overwhelming joy rapidly spilled down her cheeks. Did Penelope's fierce loyalty and Matteo's dark devotion keep you on the edge of your seat? True love can blossom in the most dangerous shadows, proving that everyone deserves to be seen, cherished, and fiercely protected. If you enjoyed this thrilling Mafia romance and want more exciting stories of unexpected love and crazy twists, please hit that like button right now. We need your support. Share this video with all your friends, and never forget to subscribe to our channel for more epic tales.